Hey there, got a quick question for you. When was the last time that you rotated your tires? Well, the general rule is that you should do it every time you change your oil, approximately every 5,000 miles. But why should you do it? Which tires do you rotate where? What about those pesky TPMS sensors? And how can you safely and easily do it yourself? Well, stay tuned because this episode covers everything that you ever wanted to know about rotating your tires. So how do you rotate your tires? Well, just get in and step on the gas. But seriously, before we get into all the nitty-gritty details of rotating your tires, let's talk about some basics first. So why should you bother doing this? Well, it helps extend the life of your tires, and as you know, they ain't cheap. Now, as they roll down the road, they develop certain wear patterns. The front different from the rear, the left different from the right. Especially is true for the front because it's steering your vehicle while the rear tires are just going along for the ride. So by rotating your tires, it's forcing them to develop new wear patterns, thus extending the life of your tire. Now, it's especially true for certain tire manufacturers because in order to maintain their warranties, you got to rotate them on a regular basis. So how often should you rotate your tires? Well, like I said at the top of the show, every 5,000 miles or around that time that you change your oil. Now the cost is going to vary depending on whether you do it yourself or take it to a shop. If you do it yourself, you got to have the right tools. If you don't, well, that's going to cost you a little bit of money. If you take it to a shop, well, they're going to cost you 20 bucks unless you bought the tires there. Then they'll probably do it for free. But then you got all that waiting around and nobody likes that. Now, one thing to consider also is the tire manufacturer's warranties. In order to keep them valid, you got to have them rotated on a regular basis every 5,000 miles, and you got to have proper shop records. So your DIY situation isn't going to cover that. So that's another thing to take into consideration. Now, the first question that people ask me is, which tires do I rotate where? Now, here's where I want you to just stop. Don't ask me, don't ask your mechanic, your neighbor, your buddy, the internet, or that other guy on TV or YouTube. Here's what I want you to do. Go in your glove box and grab this thing called the owner's manual. Look in the back in the index for tire rotation. This is the best and only place you should be looking for this information. And here's why. Even if your buddy might have the same year, make, and model as you, there might be some other difference, such as directional tires or all-wheel drive versus not. And these things make a huge difference when it comes to tire rotation. So if you don't remember anything else from this episode that you're watching right now, remember this one thing, your owner's manual. The only place for this information. Now, there are many factors that can determine how you rotate your tires. For example, whether your vehicle is two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, or rear-wheel drive, front-wheel drive like this Jetta, whether you've got directional or non-directional tires, whether you've got staggered tires where the offset and size of the tires is different in the front to the back. And then there's one other factor that comes into play, whether you've got a full-size spare tire. A lot of owner's manuals recommend that you rotate in your spare tire in with your active tires. Now, if you've never done this, I recommend that you don't, and here's why. Because the tread difference between your full-size spare tire and your active tires might be different. And if so, it might mess with your drivetrain, and you definitely don't want that. The other thing is if you've got one of those little tiny donut tires for a spare tire, definitely don't mix that in. That is used for emergencies only. The typical tire rotation for a front-wheel drive vehicle is where you move the fronts to the rear while crossing the rears back up to the front. Now, the opposite is true for rear-wheel drive vehicles, where you move the rears up to the front and cross the fronts back to the rear. Now, this differs for performance vehicles. Sometimes they want you to go side to side or just front to back. Now, this is all just an overview, and again, don't listen to what I'm saying because it's going to vary between vehicle to vehicle. Case in point, this 2016 Jetta, it wants me to go from front to back on both sides, no crossing. So when in doubt, owner's manual. Now let's talk for a few seconds about directional tires. These can be difficult to deal with, but thankfully they aren't on most vehicles. They're mainly found on high-performance sports cars. They'll have directional marker on the sidewalls like this one right here, and they're also easy to spot because the tread design is the same on both sides of the tread, coming to a Y shape down the middle. Now, because of this, they can only be rotated from front to back on the same side. Or you got to dismount them and then remount them in order to be on the opposite side of the vehicle. It's a major hassle. Now, when we come back from our break, I'm going to show you the step-by-step as well as all of my tips for safely and properly rotating your tires. Rotating your tires isn't that difficult. Once you've identified the tire rotation pattern for your specific vehicle in your owner's manual, the next step is jacking up your vehicle. Now, whether you've done this in the past or this is your first time, please be sure to pay attention to this next segment because I do cover a lot of safety tips. Safety is the most important part of all of this. And if after watching this you still aren't comfortable, then you might be better off taking it to a professional. But seriously, this isn't that hard, guys. So what do you need? Well, you're gonna need a good floor jack. If you've got a lowered or low profile vehicle, then get a low profile jack like this one. Otherwise, you can get away with a standard full-size jack. Now you're gonna need some good jack stands. 2 should be fine, but if you need to cross your tires for rotation, then you might wanna consider jacking up all 4 corners of your ride, in which case you'd need 4. But don't cheap out on these, it's your life at stake. I use these 4-ton jacks, which can support up to 8,000 pounds. Get some wheel chocks. If you don't have them, then some 2x4s or logs will work just fine. Now for dealing with your lugs, you can use the tire iron provided with your vehicle. But if you have a ratchet and the right size socket, that's always preferred for efficiency. Now if you haven't done this in a while, you're working with an older vehicle that might have some rust, be sure to have a breaker bar handy. And finally, while a lot of people recommend tightening your lugs back down by hand, don't do it. It's horrible advice. Get a torque wrench. They can get pricey, so if you can't afford one right now, hint, add one to your Christmas list. Borrow one from a friend or rent one from a shop if you can. Or worst case scenario, torque them down by hand with your tire iron or your ratchet, then drive to a shop or a friend's house to get it done right. Just please get them torqued to the proper specification. If over torqued, you can warp your rotors. If under torqued, you could lose a wheel. Neither scenario is good, people, so do it right, always. Well, now that you know all the tools that you need to rotate your tires, if you don't have something, now might be a good time to go get it. But if you do have what you need, well, let's get down to business. After finding your vehicle's rotation pattern, you need to find a flat surface. Avoid slanted driveways or any surface that's not flat and smooth. So your gravel driveway is definitely not an option. The Motorz Studio is a 2-car garage concrete slab and is just perfect. Now put your transmission in park, and if you've got a manual transmission, put it in the first gear and pull on your e-brake. Now when chocking your wheels, I also wanted to point out if you're jacking up the left front of your vehicle, you want to chock the right rear. But if you're lifting up the whole left side, well, you want to chock the whole right side too. Now before you jack up your vehicle, you want to break loose all of your lugs. And before we do that, we got to get this wheel cap off. Pulls off just like that. Now have your breaker bar handy just in case they get a little snug or too hard to remove. Now you don't want to remove them, you just want to loosen them, just like that. So where should you place your jack stands? Well, a good place to start is your owner's manual for proper lift points, like here and here. It should show you exactly where to place your jack stands in order to safely support your ride after it's been jacked up. Now the owner's manual shows you the perfect lift point for your vehicle, which happens to be this pinch weld right here. I'll show you a little bit more about that later. But the problem is we got to get a jack and a jack stand in here at the same time. Otherwise it's just not going to work. So what's the solution? Well, for the 2016 Volkswagen Jetta that I've got here, the best place was to put the jack on the outside and the jack stand on the inside. So I'm going to lower it back down and show you how I got to this point. Now you may not know this, but on most vehicles there's like a little dimple or some indentation on the side of your vehicle, on the front and the back. This is to indicate where on your vehicle you should be jacking your vehicle at. So it's actually here on this reinforced pinch weld that you want to jack up your vehicle, not back up here. So if you look at my blurry finger in the foreground, you'll see this pinch weld. That's where the vehicle manufacturer recommends as the lift point, but we needed one more. So if you look in the back where my laser pointer is pointing, there's a bolt that's coming off a good suspension point. That is another good spot. So that's where I'm actually going to put my jack stand, where I'm going to put my jack to lift up the vehicle, right there on that pinch weld. Now your hydraulic jack probably comes with one of these metal surfaces that rotates along with a rubber pad that goes down in between. But there's also these specialized hockey pucks with a slice cut out of the middle right there that can go in there, and that's another good way to deal with these pinch weld surfaces. That's what I'm going to be using, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, so what I like to do first is to position the jack into place, and then take this little hockey puck thing and put it in the pinch weld. This one's at a little bit of an angle, so it helps to put it on first, and then slowly put the jack into place, give it some pressure right in the center. That looks good. And then go to town. All right. Now, normally you only need about 1 inch underneath the tire to take the tire off, but in our case, we got to get a jack way underneath there. So I've got to go up a little bit more. Let's position this into place and then slowly lower it down. There. Now let's talk a little bit about safety, or as what I like to call in this scenario, redundancy. So first, we've got a jack stand that's underneath the vehicle, and that's supporting the vehicle just great. But should that slip, like if we have an earthquake here in California or somebody comes slamming into the vehicle really hard, you want it to fall on something else other than the ground. So leave your jack in place, just snug it up to the vehicle. You don't want it supporting the vehicle and lifting it up, just so it's snug. So if the jack fails, it'll land on that. The third thing that you can do is to take that spare tire that's out of the trunk and put it underneath the pinch weld, the side of your vehicle right there. So if the jack fails and this fails, it lands on something other than the ground, that being your tire. The last thing you want to do after you've got all your redundancies set up is to give it a little push. Make sure that it stays put. Just do this. Not too hard, just give it a good push. And then you're good to go. Now, since our tire rotation pattern for our Jetta is to move the front tire to the rear and the rear tire to the front on the exact same side, it's gonna make it a lot easier if we can just jack up both ends of the vehicle. So I'm gonna pull my floor jack out, grab another jack stand, and get to work. Let's get this off and break the lugs. Now for our jack stand in the rear, I'm gonna go behind the tire right here to this bolt. There's a spring right there and an arm. It's a perfect place because it's solid and it's not gonna move. Okay, let's find that pinch weld right there. Looks nasty. Get our jack going. And up we go. Okay, the rear tire is lifted off the ground by about an inch. This is still pretty high, but that's fine. Position the jack stand into place right there and slowly lower it onto it. Okay, now I've got the front end jacked up. It's on a jack stand. Then the little push test looks good. Got the rear end jacked up, also on a jack stand. Did the push test, it's not going anywhere. And just for some redundancy, I'm gonna leave that jack in there. Just a little bit of pressure on that pinch weld. Now I can do my rotation. If your wheel doesn't pop off nice and easy, just give it a good punch on one side. Put this underneath here just for now. All right, there we go. Well, now that you got your tires off, it's also a great time to inspect your rotors and your brake pads to make sure that there aren't any issues. There we go. Now you just want to hand tighten these for now. Just snug them up. All right, and rotate the rear up to the front. Now I'll show you later, you need to tighten these down with a torque wrench and a star pattern, and that's kind of how I'm doing them by hand right now, while pushing on the wheel. Now let's get this Jetta on the ground. Now this is the step that you guys definitely don't want to skip. You want to torque all of those lug nuts down to the manufacturer's recommended torque specification. You can use a standard torque wrench like this one. I like to use my digital torque wrench, and I'll show you why. But whatever you do, make sure you don't skip this step before you hit the road. On our Jetta here, the manual shows 88 foot-pounds of torque. Other vehicles might be different, so be sure to check your owner's manual or your Haynes manual. Now, I forgot to mention our Jetta has 11/16 inch size lugs. Now the cool thing about this is it beeps when it hits the right torque. You want to do this in a star pattern. And you always want to press right at the end of the torque wrench. Don't hold here and push, just at the very end. Now when you're all done with this one, all you got to do is power it off. But with this one, manual, make sure you set it back all the way back to 0. Let's get this wheel cap back on. There we go. Now here are a few more tips. Always make sure that your tires have valve stem caps. There's really no excuse because they're cheap. They're like $1 each. Keep a few extra in your glove box. They help keep the valve stem from getting corroded, which can be much more expensive than $1 to get it fixed if they get to that point. This is also a great time to check the air pressure of your tires, including your spare. The PSI spec can be found in your door jamb. And then be sure to continue to check your air pressure every single month. It can save you close to $100 a year by keeping your tire pressure at the proper pressure level. Well, now that you've rotated all your tires, there's one more thing that you got to check. Does your vehicle have a TPMS, or a tire pressure monitoring system? If so, it needs to be recalibrated so that it knows which tire is moved where. So if you get a low tire pressure warning sign on your dashboard, you know which tire to go to and it's the correct tire. Now this process varies from vehicle to vehicle, and the best place to start is your owner's manual. For example, on this 2016 Volkswagen Jetta, I just need to go into the glove box and press this set button right here for about 2 seconds, wait for the beep, and then drive it around for about 20 minutes. It's super simple, but not all vehicles are that easy. Now speaking of rotating tires, I tried to tell Alan he needs to do it to his new Dodge Demon because he keeps smoking him so hard, but at this point he probably just needs new tires. But he's got his work cut out for him because the 840 horse of his new Demon is just the start.
Exactly, and we've got actually 2,035 horsepower between the 4-cylinder, the 6-cylinder, the 8-cylinder, and the 10-cylinder. Let me show you what we got.
I have a great deal of respect for FCA and all its brands. The company's founder, Walter P. Chrysler, inspired engineering excellence that spawned unparalleled innovation, many of which have benefited the entire automotive industry and society at large, and still inspires today.
It's so cool to be in the auto industry today, whether you're looking at 4 cylinders, 6 cylinders, big 900 pound-feet of torque towing monster, or an 8-cylinder, 840 horsepower drag race machine, or a car designed for the twisties like the 10-cylinder, 645 horsepower Viper ACR. There is something for everybody. To me, I think I have found the most fun car to own in my life. It's a Dodge Demon. 770 pound-feet of torque, 840 horsepower. All I can say is, I have never been to a racetrack and drag race before, but this one is designed to do it. A bunch of my buddies have bought Dodge Demons and they have thrown down the gauntlet. Guys like Richard Rollins from Fast and Loud and Dennis Collins, we all have black ones. This seems to be the color of choice right now, but my one buddy got an orange one. He said, I'll race you at the racetrack, come on down. But that's what this car is all about, taking it to the racetrack. Yes, it does pop a wheelie, and it can do 9.65 quarter mile. Horsepower and torque are strange bedfellows, and a good example of that is this Dodge Ram with a Cummins 6-cylinder turbocharged engine in it. It only has 385 horsepower, but it's got 900 pound-feet of torque. This thing can tow a house. But today we're going to talk all about the brand new 2018 Dodge Demon. The car, yes, that pops a wheelie.
You have done something that they say couldn't be done. Last year at the New York International Auto Show, then CEO Tim Kuniskis unveiled the highly anticipated Dodge Challenger SRT Demon to the world. With only 3,300 being produced, I knew immediately I had to have one.
Yeah, baby!
The Dodge Demon is faster than some of those $1.5 million exotic supercars. It's really built to be an elite performance machine. It's powered by a supercharged 6.2-liter Hemi SRT Demon V8 engine.
Well, here we are inside the Dodge Demon, taking it for a little drive. 840 horsepower, 770 pound-feet of torque, which is amazing. When I first picked it up, the first thing I had to do was do a burnout. And unfortunately, I didn't realize that just hitting the traction control off button doesn't really turn off the traction control. You have to push it in and hold it for 5 seconds to really defeat the traction control. Then you can do a burnout.
Every feature was chosen to optimize drag strip performance.
You really have to be thoughtful driving this car. My feeling is this car is not for just anybody. You really have to know what you're doing to manage all this horsepower. I've driven the Hellcat and I spent a pretty good amount of time in the Hellcat.
001 Hellcat's going on the block.
This is the #1 serial number. Craig Jackson may actually buy it himself. The Demon is basically a Hellcat on steroids. It's the basic same engine only they use different pistons and all kinds of other different parts, a bigger supercharger to get from 707 horsepower to 840. And if you want all 840, you have to do some special stuff and use race fuel. So it really is 808 horsepower every day, as long as you're driving with the red key.
Even the tires are specially made by Nitto. They're drag radials. And it even has the demon's face right on the sidewall of the tire.
Now I will say also that these tires are like $750 each. So if you want to waste them on burning out, that's great, which I've almost done. And I've had a lot of fun, but my feeling is the next time I put a set of tires on this car, I'm going straight to the racetrack.
I really love this machine. It has unbelievable power, and car and driver performance tests clocked it at 0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds. 0 to 100, 5.7 seconds, with a standing quarter mile of 9.65. Top speed of 168 miles an hour, and after driving it, I could instantly feel that extra tenth that Tim referred to in our interview. And right after, he let me in on a little secret.
This is something you're never supposed to admit. You're never supposed to design a car for yourself. You're never supposed to design a car for your team. You're never supposed to bring something to market that's internal. You're always supposed to look to the outside market, right? And look at what the customers want. But the reality is, we have a core group of people inside our company that are passionate drag racers. It's that last tenth of effort, that last tenth of push to go beyond what you're supposed to do to something that actually is gonna make history.
And make history, it certainly did. The Demon is demolishing so many records, it's hard to keep track.
You know what? It just started raining. And the one thing about the Demon is, with all this horsepower and these slick tires, it's time to put it away. So, toodles!
Now check out this 51-piece mechanics tool set in gunmetal chrome from the new Craftsman. Well, there you go. Everything that you wanted to know about rotating your tires and properly and safely jacking up your vehicle. Now, you know that little hockey puck I was using earlier to help jack up this Jetta? Well, it's not required, but it does help make your life a little bit easier. It comes in different sizes. So if you're interested in picking up one of these little guys, I'll leave some links in the show notes area. Now, do you need to get a front end alignment after you rotate your tires? Typically you don't, but if it is pulling one way or the other, go get it taken care of. Well, I've got to go drive this Jetta around for 20 minutes and get it all recalibrated. I'll catch you guys next time on Motorz. Hey there, got a quick question for you. Uno mas. You should do it every time you rotate your oil. Tire rotation pattern. But everything you ever want to know about rotating your vehicle. Now, as far as calibrated, so I'll get you. You ever wanted to know